engineers, computer guys, and we had full-time jobs, and we were thinking, okay, what can we do on the side? Let's change it up a bit. So we were exploring, brainstorming some ideas. And I've had an idea since 2003 when I was taking my master's degree at RIT in Rochester. And I noticed that all my books had typos in it. I was paying $100 a pop for textbooks. I thought it was pretty unacceptable. So then I found that contacting these publishers and telling about them, they really had no mechanism to track these things. So I thought, man, this might be an opportunity. So for example, I sent one to Sage Publishing back in 03. You can show that here. This is an email. This is a response I got, basically telling them I found a typo in their book and I'd like to tell them about it. So this was a common theme. This is a trend I noticed, a common response from a lot of the publishers I reached out to that I bought books from and had typos, and they were recurring. You know, I would speak to an underclassman, he'd have the same book, would have bought a new book, it said new edition, and these errors were still in there. So I said, wow, there's a systemic problem here. And it was more noticed on textbooks.
There's a grammatical problem in the letter.
Oh.
That if you'll email me the name of the book and what the errors are specifically, that's fragment.
There you go, yeah. I mean,
it's not even a real sentence.
Yeah.
No comment after hello either.
Yeah.
Comments.
Yeah, hopefully she wasn't also the author.
Or the editor.
So that's pretty much sums up the inspiration. And going into the idea, and I'll touch upon this a little bit more when I get into the keys to crowdsourcing and the model that we've proposed and that drove our design. So basically, we thought, okay, or back in 03, I was thinking, I want to create a website where readers can report typos in books. Errors will be corrected in subsequent editions. So that would mean you get a bunch of people to submit errors. They get sent to publishers, kind of like be that conduit, and then they get fixed in subsequent editions. That was kind of the really basic concept that I had in my mind. At the time, I had, there weren't really any mechanisms in terms of the internet technologies to allow someone to easily do that. They'd have to populate information like, here's the publisher, here's the author, here's the page number. It was a bit cumbersome, so I always was a little bit hesitant to get into something like that. I thought, I don't know if that would ever gain any traction. But then a couple years later, like I was saying, I got with a couple friends and we were just discussing some ideas, and we had a few, and then I thought, you know what? And I've been reading books ever since, just outside of school and still see errors, and I thought, I still see this problem, and I had this idea for a while, and I thought, let's get together and put this website together. And we looked at what was out there. We saw, okay, there's this thing called Google Books. Google Books allows you to access their database pretty much for free. You just put the label, said powered by Google, and you can use it. And almost any book that we tried to test out, and books that we found errors in and that we've tracked over the years, we put them in there and they all showed up. So that was key to us embarking on this, because we thought, okay, there's this way to do this pretty easily, and it's not that cumbersome. So, and the problem, one of the challenges was that when we started this, none of us really lived near each other. Hiro and I lived together, or lived in the same city in Rochester at the time, and now I live in San Diego, he's still in Rochester. The other two guys, one guy was in New York, one guy was in San Francisco, so it was a really interesting dynamic. And two of the guys actually had never met in person. And we were all working remote, and we thought, wow, is this actually gonna work? And believe it or not, it really did. Working remotely and using, things like OneHub to project manage the whole thing and to track tasks. We used Google Groups for a while. And just basically emailed each other every day. We all carried smartphones, and we actually were able to create something despite the distance. So here's where I get into some of the conceptual stuff that we have in our heads. So the keys to crowdsourcing. The first thing you need is a conduit, like I mentioned. So a platform or a way to reach out to these people. And in this case, it's obviously the internet and creating a web page, simply put. So the crowd, in this case, we took kind of a play on the term cloud, would obviously generate the data that we would feed into our site. The other thing that we realized, or we felt was important, the other two things, was bringing awareness. Because we felt, okay, we care about these sorts of things. We know a few other people that care, but in general, we have a site, should we create a site where there's not a big enough market where enough people care? And so we thought, okay, how could we drive that? So we thought, okay, let's invoke some awareness on this site. Let's not just make it a site where, hey, type in the ISBN or the author and submit a typo. Let's make it real time. Let's put in blogs. Let's put in examples. Let's let other people see the issues out there so that there is this awareness brought to the, kind of like what Grammar Girl was saying. I mean, unfortunately, the awareness is the other way around. We're being taught the wrong things through media, but maybe with this, you know, we could show, okay, here's the problem, here's how you fix it, and look how ubiquitous it is. It's an issue. So we would do that. We would provide this awareness and showing that it's detrimental through blogs, through this news feed that we have on our website. Once you sign in, we'll step you through that. And it shows you all the latest books and all the typos that were submitted to them and all the comments that say, okay, yeah, this is a typo, this is not a typo, this is why it's a typo. So all those sorts of things were what we had in our head to drive that awareness. And the other thing was the incentive. A lot of people were finding submit typos for the sake of submitting typos, which is great. We love that. But we do want to provide some sort of incentive. How do we give back to the community for populating our database with all this information? So we've been working pretty hard trying to get publishers to hear us out. Say, hey, look what our users are finding. We'll give you this information. You just provide us visibility into the progress of how they're getting into subsequent editions. That's all we want. So we can feed that back into our community and reward them for it. Because we felt like talking to some of our users, they said, yeah, it would be great if we know that my correction that I submitted is going to get into a book, essentially get immortalized into editions going forward. So that was what we thought. Okay, so that's kind of what really drives this, you know, that composes this model for us. So with this, we feed that into our typos model. So specifically more specific to how the site works and what we envision. So basically, stepping through this flowchart, we have a visitor. They come to the site. They can either choose to register or browse as a guest. So if you browse as a guest, that's great. We'll take it. You know, you submit your information. We're happy. But what you lose is this other side. If you register, you utilize the site features. Like I was saying, you can vote on other people's typos. You could friend people. You could see all the other information that everyone else has submitted. You just interact and be part of this community. But both of them could report typos. And then once they're reported, other users validate them. So again, they vote, they comment, they basically say this is a typo, this isn't. And then with that, we take it into providing the information to publishers. So far, to date, our success with having them hear us out has been fairly marginal, but we're working on it. And I'll provide some examples where we were successful, but you know, in many cases, we don't hear back. Go ahead, sir.
I'm going to just play devil's advocate.
Sure.
This is truly devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
These typos don't really affect knowledge transfer. They just make the textbook publishers look bad. So
Sure.
the main thing you're doing is helping the textbook publishers to get by without hiring enough for adequate qualified.
You know, that's a good point. That's another way to look at it. You know, I honestly hadn't thought of it that way. You know, maybe we are telling them about it and then they're sending bots or, well, it's pretty secure so they can't come and sweep our information, but maybe, yeah, once we contact them, they go in the site and they say, oh yeah, great, here's some fixes and it saves us money. That's possible, but I don't think that's happening. And the knowledge transfer thing, yeah, I agree to some extent. You know, the examples that Andy Rooney pointed out, those were detrimental to those kids. You know, I'm glad those got caught and those got fixed. So that's like the extreme case. But in general, a lot of typos we're seeing are very minor. You know, there's a misplaced apostrophes, comma splices, you know, split definitives, things like that. That the message is still conveyed, but you know, you're not really losing out on the information.
Except that it conveys the message that precision language is irrelevant.
That too.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And that's
You guys don't care about it.
You're right,
Yeah.
and it should be something that we care about. Because if we just get complacent about it, you know, who knows? You know, 100 years from now, we're all writing and talking text lingo or something, you know. So, go ahead.
Just to add to that also, and it's interesting to look at, to bring awareness to all these typos. So one thing is that we're aggregating all this information that's spread across a lot of different people, and by doing that, we're able to present how big of an issue this is, which might not have been relevant or might not have been obvious if there was no community based around that. So one of the things that we'll get to a little bit later in the presentation is we can point out the publishers that aren't doing a good job and bring more awareness and more attention to that.